Welcome to the Filmfest Bremen in cooperation with Indie Film Talk. Today we are looking at the documentary Rust by director Rafał Małecki, and he is here with me today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me at the festival.
Yeah. And thank you for being here. Your movie has its first ever screening here in Germany, and you're following an artist who does a very specific kind of work. Can you tell us a little bit about her and what she's doing?
The protagonist of my film is Mariola Wawrzusiak. She's a famous Polish artist, sculptor. She uses a very specific method of doing art, which is collecting scrap metal and welding. She welds in a very difficult process, and she has a specific approach to what she represents in her art.
Yeah. And how did you first come in contact with her or with her work? When did you recognize her?
I was writing about art some time ago, and then I had the privilege to meet her in person during one of her exhibitions, and I had an interview with her. I was really fascinated with this art, how provocative they are, how spooky and thought-provoking, and I was really interested what's in her. She's a very delicate person, very sensitive, but on the other hand, she's doing a harsh job. This art demands a lot, it costs a lot, and she makes very big, sometimes very complicated pieces of art. And I didn't even expect that we meet again later, but a couple of years later, I had a chance to be with the camera in her studio, and we just recorded one scene, the first scene of welding there, and I was really fascinated by this process, how it looks, how demanding it is, and that was during the workshop, film workshop, and after that shooting, I decided, why not to make a full documentary about her way? And so that was the process, 3 years. I followed her in the atelier during exhibitions when she had her private situations looking for scrap metal everywhere. And also I was with her in her shelter. She has a specific place where she escapes. I will not tell where it is, but it's a beautiful piece of nature. It's an exposure, no one around, and it's a very magical place, but also a place where she needs to escape from civilization when she has to.
Mm-hmm. And when you first contacted her about this idea, not only, well, we don't do an interview or two, but let me follow you around for weeks and months and years to make a movie out of it, how did she react?
You have to be very, very tricky, you know. You don't tell the artist, I will follow you 5 years. She will never agree to that. So I was just, you're doing bit by bit. Let's shoot another scene, all right? Let's shoot another scene, one more shooting day. And, after some time, we have half of the film. Let's finish this film. That's the way it goes.
Was she ever suspicious? Was she ever like, how many times do you want to comment? Is the movie finished already?
She was very patient with me, but only because we know each other. We are friends, and it's a funny story that after some time I discovered that her husband was in the same class at school with my wife. So it's a real coincidence, it happened in some different place. So we had some connection. After this, we need to finish this. We need to do a good film. And I think I succeeded because I wasn't directing her. I observed the situation. I let her speak for herself, because it is very difficult to make a film about art and an artist because the artists have a lot to say, and they have their own voice, their own imagination, and it's in it's juxtaposed to the filming methods because you are directing actually her. So we had to find some kind of compromise. And I was listening very carefully what she's doing, how she's doing that, how she reacts to me, to the camera, to the crew. And I think I tried to understand, be in her mind, to watch her eyes. And I also wanted that she narrates the film. She told me a couple of stories, and it's not a biographical film. It's more like a fiction. It's something in between. Because what she does, it's not real, it's imagination. It's like a dream. This film is a dream.
Yeah, and for me, I really felt this approach. I never had the feelings that the filmmaker starts to go wild or to mimic her art, but it was a very intimate movie with a window into the world of Mariola, where you can just watch her authentically do what she does. And she is an interesting person. Like it's so, yeah, it's an adventure to follow her around. How did you find out what the story and the dramatic story of the film will be? Because you said the first thing you saw is she was wielding in her workshop, and this could have been all the movie, but the story you're telling and which turns it takes, it's much more interesting and much more delicate. So when did you find out how to navigate this dramatic story?
With documentaries like this, you find out after some time. You have to try different approaches in the beginning, and you don't really know if it goes in this direction or the other one. I think that after half of the shooting, I already knew that this film has to be about her ideas, her obsessions. That was originally what fascinated me. She's obsessed with certain things. It's just, you cannot do it like a regular job because it's too heavy. It's very complicated, and it's a little bit crazy to do it. But when I knew her background, when I knew a little bit what's in her head, what kind of topics she incorporates in her thinking, I was even more fascinated, and I understood that this is a very quiet cry to the world about the situation we have with the nature, how people react to each other, how much violence we have in our world, and how much the world is polluted at the moment, and that we are living in a very peaceful world which is actually endangered, which is actually on the verge of a big catastrophe. And this was the pollution originally in the film. There's a breakdown of a factory, and something happens in the film, and it's just the example of what can happen with our world just within minutes. And you have to understand that peace and quietness around is not for sure. And that's a funny thing that she talked about aggression and war, and that people are afraid of bombs. When she told me, I was a little bit surprised because I wasn't afraid of bombs, actually. It was too abstract to me. And after a while, when we have this war in Ukraine, I understood its reality. It's really possible. And people over there in Ukraine are afraid of bombs. So the artists have this skill to foresee the future. They feel it closer. They feel it better. So it's very real, very prophetic what she did. And the same with the pandemic. In the film, we have this very strange atmosphere. Something was in the air. Something was about to happen. And, when I was finishing the edit, the pandemic broke out, we kind of sensed that together. And in the film, we have the sense of isolation she experiences, and well, the whole world experienced the same, exactly the very same isolation a couple of months later.
Yeah. And the tagline of the movie is art during the post-apocalypse, and this is just what you're talking about. Like in her world, in her mind, we are already living in kind of a post-apocalyptic world where nature is about to fall down, where war is lingering in every corner, and still, as you say it, the reality kind of caught up with her art. You edited the movie during the pandemic outbreaks and the war in the Ukraine broke loose. Does it change the film a lot? Do you have the feeling that people during the pandemic watch a different movie than people during the war in the Ukraine? Do you have to re-watch it again, or do you have to step back to evaluate it for what it is? How does the world change your movie?
I think it's very surprising, not only for Mariola, but also for me, that what she did, and was very vague in the beginning, appeared to be quite realistic, and I think we had a very good timing with this film, because people could understand, could see that she was crying to the world, and she was right. Nobody believed that before. When you look in the film, she talks to some people at the gallery, and she tries to convey them that we are living in a very difficult times, that we are killing animals and everything is going down. And the people there in the gallery, they didn't believe it, you know. And well, after some time, after what happened in the film later on, we could really say she was right. And I would say the timing was good for the film, because we had many festivals, around 60 festivals, and I think in the different corners of the world, it's pretty universal. It's not about Europe, it's not about rich countries, it's like a general message to the world. It's understandable everywhere, and I think we have been maybe 2 steps before everything happened, and that's the power of the film. And I could understand it just after all this happened. When we were doing it, we had no idea that the feedback will be so big, that we are doing a thing which is even more important afterwards than we were thinking before.
Yeah. I would like to go back to some aesthetic aspects of the movie, because, as you said, you were observing there are these interesting and very important messages in her art and artwork, and you had to find a visual and an acoustic language to transport it in a movie, because that's the point of it, that it's kind of more than just going to an exhibition, but you have to put it into a form. The first thing that springs into the eye is the camera work. Your film already received multiple awards for the great cinematography. And just like in Mariola's art, you have to find a balance between showing nature and showing her workplace, her mechanical work. How did you compose these 2 worlds picture-wise? What was the important thing for these 2 parts of the movie, and how to bring them together?
This was the idea for the film from the very beginning. There was one secret key. Probably you noticed the key. We used specific colors. The title is called Rust, and there's a lot of rust in the film. Everything is rusty there. Almost in every scene we've got this color. And the opposition to this, there's green. The green of the nature. And that's how I built it. We only accepted this palette, and because it's pretty much to the nature. On one hand, rust, metal represents the human world, but it comes from the earth. It's brown, it's natural, it has the natural origin, and green is just living trees, grass, and I was trying to find this balance and to mix visual, to operate on colors, and that's one thing. But also another inspiration for Mariola was the nature we could really film. So she escapes to the nature, and only when we could be there in the forest, on the island, we could hear animals, we could shoot nature, and I understood the idea of the film after that. The nature around there had specific colors, so the colors were brown or green, and the inspiration was pretty clear that everything is connected somehow with each other, so that was the key.
Mm-hmm. And you already mentioned it, you could hear the nature while being with her. Another important thing is the sound design in your film. We've had a lot of noises when she's in nature and when she's working. You've got kind of a minimalist soundtrack in many parts where it's just an atmospheric noise or a drone. How did you go about the sound design in general?
The film was planned to be full of different noises, small sounds, ambiences, and it was the cornerstone of the film. And we used all different sounds. We reproduced the sounds metal can make, for instance. We recorded animals, wolves, owls, and so on and so forth. And we mixed that together. And the drone, this murmurs, strange buzzing effects were an attempt to recreate her imagination, her head, mm-hmm. what's in her, because she lives in a constant state of uneasiness, mm-hmm. and I wanted to hear it in the sound. And so the idea is that it was pretty what she represents by her art. When she watched the film, she said it's pretty what she really loves, what she really likes, and what she hears looking at animals. Because when you see some sculptures, you can hear they are crying almost. And we were, brave enough to recreate the possible sounds the sculptures can produce. Mm-hmm. So that was the idea, to get into the dream. It's like a nightmare. Sometimes it's like a nightmare. You are dreaming something and you hear those spooky voices, mm-hmm. right? But it's for something. It's to convey the message. So that was the idea. And the music is it's made by Michał Woźniak, who's a Polish composer. It's pretty minimalistic, but in the beginning it's kind of epic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's kind of suitable to what she does.
Mm-hmm. And your project has so many aspects where something could have gone wrong. Like, you want to portray this artist and you want to take part in her life and you want to be objective, but you have all your own artistic ideas of how the color scheme works, how the camera works, how the sound works. And all of this over a long period of time. Was there a part that was especially tricky for you? Something where you said, oh, I don't really know how we can convey it, but it's super important to me? Or where you think, okay, I thought we could do this and this, but it technically doesn't pan out? Or was everything just falling into place during shooting?
Not really, because I was looking for the form, mm-hmm. as I told you before. And in the beginning, we expected more talk film, mm-hmm. but there's not much talking there, I would say. Maybe some comments, but sometimes quiet. And we discovered after some time we don't need to, decipher art, because you can't do it really. And so that was the process, from a lot to the very minimal approach. And if I would say if something was difficult, the shooting welding is difficult because you cannot look at this. There are certain dangerous aspects of shooting, this activity. It's one thing. Another thing, we had some dangerous also situations on the lake. When you are shooting on water, it's not easy.
Yeah.
And well, it's like a feature film,
Yeah.
You had to do it somehow, It was not possible, but you did it.
It's just a wonderful thing. The two most dangerous things are the fire of the welding and the water of the lake. Again, the two opposites that are kind of working together.
Yeah, the elements are everywhere.
Even though the fire and the water. And my last question for you is, a lot of this movie is about symbiosis. Like the art of Mariola is a connection between metal and nature. Your movie is a connection between her art and a special style of filmmaking. And of course, there will be a connection between the audience through your film to Mariola's art. Do you have a preferred access for the audience when they are, oh, this sounds interesting, her art looks interesting? Do you think it's nicer to see her artworks in a gallery and exhibition and then watch your movie to get a aha and wow moment afterwards? Or is it more interesting to see your movie first and then go out and dig deeper into Mariola's work?
I would say that art is foremost in the first place. So probably it could be good to just experience her pieces of art on your own, and then you delve into the context, because this film is about the context. It's not purely about art, but also kind of biographical elements, kind of background, why, the reasoning, what for. So I think it's good to see the art and then watch the film. But I know for sure that after the screening of the film, it opens up hearts and it gives extra information, and people are so much surprised, are so impressed when they could really understand how it works, what's the process like, because it's pretty complicated. You are not aware, the art is great, but you are not aware how much it costs. And when you just get to this knowledge, you look at Mariola in a completely different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing happened to me. I didn't know what to expect first, and afterwards my heart was opened and my eyes as well. So thank you so much for your movie Rust, and thank you for the nice interview.
Thank you so much. I wish you a good day, and I invite all the viewers, if you have a chance, just watch it.
Okay. And if you want to watch it, you can do it, of course, here on the Filmfest Bremen. Rust is in the category Nachhaltigkeit and will be streaming online until May the 1st.